Hey kids, MC here with another awesome Shutter Magazine lighting how-to. This month it's all about independent lighting zones and building your lighting patterns one light at a time, because this way you can see exactly what's going on with each light. So ultimately we'll work up to this 3-light setup that you see here, this portrait of Ashley, where I'm using a classic 3-point lighting setup where we've got a key light lighting her face. We have an accent light around the back, giving us a nice accent light, edge light, rim light, whatever you want to call it, along the left side of her neck, hair, and shoulder. And lastly, we've got our background light, which is allowing us to exactly control the illumination on the background. And I will walk you through exactly how I create this 3-point lighting setup light by light. So let's start off with our first light, with one light. I want you guys to know that even with one light, you do have some options. You are a bit limited, but there are options nonetheless. So I started off here at 6 feet, with Ashley 6 feet from the background, and the key light, which is a Photech soft lighter on a Profoto head. 60-inch Photech soft lighter. It's a really nice portrait light or modifier. But a great setup for portraits, gives you a nice soft light. And that is 3 feet from Ashley. So we've got 3 feet here, and we've got 6 feet here, front to back, and light to here. So I metered this at f16, and once I had this relationship established, that's where I stayed, because we're going to eventually move all of this off the background in order to give us more control. So that's the real drag with one light, is that essentially you can do, and believe me, I love one light, you can do a ton with one light, but for when it comes to illuminating a background separately from the subject, you really are limited here. Basically, you're going to get whatever you get based on the light falling on your subject, because you're going to be reliant on the spill from the key light in order to light up the background. Whereas when you separate the zones and use separate lighting for the background, then this light is only for the subject, and then you've got another light which takes care of the background, and then you add in other lights as needed, accent lights, etc. But you do have some options, and what you can do with this scenario, and again, here I'm 6 feet, you could move a little closer if you wanted a wider background, but this is just where I started. But at a certain point, you start to lose control, because once you're super close to the background, that's as white as you're going to get it. So if you really want it super white, and I'll show you how to do that in our bonus round, our last step, I'll show you how to create a super white background. But for the purposes of this, we're just going to start with this one light. I started at 6 feet. If you wanted it a little bit brighter, you could move it a little closer. All right, so that is our starting point. Next, we're going to move the light back. Here you can see the light at 9 feet from the background, or the subject rather, Ashley at 9 feet, and the key light at 12 feet. And you can see how the background has gotten darker. So that's really, with one zone of light, that's really the control that you're going to have. You're going to have to work with distance when it comes to illuminating the background in order to control how dark or bright the background is. All right, so let's move on from there, and let's take it now to 16 feet. So again, I've pulled it further away from the background, and now you can see how it's even darker. I've got Ashley at 16 feet, I've got the key light at 19 feet, and now I'm getting a lot less spill. There's still some spill, but I'm kind of at the edge of my working space, and this is what I have to kind of, plan around. So, and if I wanted, I could always make this, I could always angle this light more acutely, like so. I could turn her, whatever I wanted, however I wanted to do it, in order to provide less light spilling on the background. You could also use flags and V-flats and stuff like that. But this is kind of what I ended up working with for this scenario. This amount of spill really is not a problem. It still gives me a lot of control for lighting this background separately, which we'll do later. So let's take a look at how all of these stack up together. All right, so here's where we started. We started off with our 6 feet and 9 feet with the light. Here we moved on to putting Ashley at 9 feet and the key light at 12 feet. And our final point where we're going to leave it and start adding in other lights is 16 feet and our key light at 19 feet. Okay, so you do need a considerable amount of space in order to really control your backgrounds. If you're working with a white background especially and you want to turn it gray or black, you're going to need some space. All right. So I wanted to also talk a little bit about broad light and short light. So once you've got your key light dialed in, then it's really up to you to determine what side of the face that you is going to work best for your subject. In the case of Ashley, either short light or broad light works great. The thing about short light, which you can see over here, is that it ends up thinning the face, whereas broad light adds volume to the face. And with a thin person, you can go either way. It really doesn't matter, but it's just good to know, to have that in your bag of tricks, a good piece of information that short light is going to help thin the face if you've got someone who needs that. So let's talk about what exactly short light and broad light are briefly. Basically, short light just means that the shadowed side of the face, right here, is facing the camera, and the lit side of the face is facing away from the camera. Where broad light, the lit side of the face is facing the camera, and the shadowed side of the face is facing away from the camera, right? So just keep that in mind when you're working with your subjects, that can help create a more pleasing looking lighting effect for your subjects. All right, so the next thing that I want, now that I've got my key light kind of dialed in, I've got it metered, I know what I want, my background is looking good, I know that I'm going to add light to it later, but it's at a good starting point. The next thing that I wanted to do was bring in a little bit of fill light onto the shadowed side of the face, because Ashley's face was really dark. You can see here with no reflector that there's a lot of shadow here, and while it's a cool look, it just was a bit too much for me. So I brought in a 3x4 white reflector here, and that really illuminated this side of the face, but it was a little too much for me. I thought that it was just too bright. It lost some of the drama. It lost some of the shadowing that I really like. This was just no reflector was too much, and the reflector close was also too much. It was too bright. So backing off the reflector helped me achieve this look, this final look. Reflector backed off. So you'll have to experiment, and that's the way you're going to control the intensity of reflectors, is by moving them closer or further away from the light that they're reflecting light from. In this case, the key light. It was filling in, bouncing light back from the key light into the shadowed side of Ashley's face. A really nice thing about reflectors is that they are a relatively inexpensive lighting source compared to a strobe, but they allow you to provide an additional zone, if you will, of light. The other factor that will help you control the intensity of your reflectors is going to be the fabric that you choose to use on the reflector. In this case, it was a white reflector, which is going to reflect less light than a silver reflector. And it's also going to give you a softer, less contrasty effect using a white reflector versus a silver reflector. All right, so now that is dialed in. And the next thing I wanted to do is turn all the lights off. Again, this is the whole benefit of working one light at a time. It's really going to allow you to see the contribution that each light is giving you to your overall lighting plan or scheme. Okay, so you can see here that now I've turned on the accent light, and in this case I've metered this light. I started off by metering this light at +1 stop over the key light, so I want it to be at f22, and you can see the effect here. All right, it just gives a really nice edge light all here, and that's all that light is giving us. And without that, if we have everything on at the same time, it's really impossible to judge and see exactly what's going on with each light, what each light is giving us. And so doing it this way, separating your lights into zones and turning them on one at a time, really helps give you a clear indication of exactly what's going on. And then from there, you can noodle and season to taste, as it were, to get just the right amount. But typically, I start with +1 stop for the accent light for a brunette, and -1 stop for a blonde, because they're going to have more, their hair is more reflective. It's going to catch the light a little bit brighter. So there you go. All right, so let's turn that off. And now here we have both of those lights together. We've got the accent and the key light combined. And you can see here that just by that simple addition of one extra light of that key light zone and having it dialed in just right, looking at it one at a time, we've been able to take the portrait of Ashley from what was a flat, kind of one-dimensional image to now a very dimensional, sculpted image that has volume. I think a much superior looking lighting effect, very simply achieved, but very deliberately achieved effect. All right, so you can see here, let's just take a look at the lighting diagram for a minute so I can show you what's going on. It's pretty self-evident, but again, we've got our key light here giving us this nice light on Ashley's face, and here we've got our accent light, which we dialed in our previous step, and that's providing all this side light over here, this rim light and accent light. We still don't have anything going on with our background, and that is going to be our next step. So let's turn all of this stuff off. All right, so we've turned off all of our lights once again, because now we're focusing on our background light. And you can see here that now I've got my background light. Oh, I should have mentioned that the accent light had a 10-degree grid spot on there in order to confine its light to a tight circle, a tight beam of light that only illuminated the areas that I wanted. In that case, it would have been Ashley's hair, neck, and shoulders, okay? And I've got the same thing going on here with this background light. I've got a light placed behind Ashley with a 10-degree grid spot on it, and that is giving us this nice circle of light around Ashley with a nice gradual fall off as well. So basically creating an in-camera vignette without having to do it using software, which is always going to look a little bit less realistic than if you're able to achieve it in camera with your lighting. And again, we're able to see exactly what we're getting here from our background light by turning off all of the other lights and looking at just only one light at a time. Now, I made this light a little bit darker because I knew that I would have some spill contributed from my key light. So I just dialed this down. Here I worked a little bit intuitively. I started off at a stop under the key light, and then I went down from there a little bit just because I knew that I was going to have some of that spill happening from the key light, even at 19 feet. Based on the angle of my light. All right, so here is our final result and our final setup. Here you can see we've got a beautiful classic 3-point lighting portrait of Ashley where we've got our key light here, and that's giving us this nice bit of light. We've got our accent light. We've got our reflector, which is filling in this side of the face, bouncing light back from here to there, giving us kind of that effect. And then we've got our background light right here, and that is giving us this nice circle of light on the background and all that fall off here and here. Okay, so pretty simple but pretty effective lighting pattern, and working with separate zones and working one light at a time really lets you dial in exactly what you want and see exactly what's going on with each of your lighting zones. Having the right modifiers, the right plan of action, and the right methodology, for lack of a better term, really allows you to precisely control exactly what you're getting. All right, so let's take a look at the conversion now. Here we've got the color and then the final black and white conversion. And now it's time for our bonus round. Everybody loves white backdrops. So I wanted to include for you a white background. Blow away white background. They're really specific in that they require kind of a different lighting scenario in order to achieve them. So basically what I've done here is I've swapped out that background light. You can see that it is now gone. The accent light and the key light have remained the same because those were working along with the reflector. Everything was working fine there. All I wanted was a different treatment for my background zone of light. Okay, and the way that I achieved that was to use 2 V-flats on either side of the seamless, and two lights with 2 white umbrellas bouncing light back onto the backdrop, creating a nice evenly lit white seamless. And just 2 lights is going to work for a 3/4, is going to be adequate for a 3/4, which you can see here. Basically, we're working with 3/4 length portrait height. If you wanted to go full length, then ideally you're going to want to double this up on each side. You're going to want to go 2 and 2 So 2 lights, 2 umbrellas, stack them, and then you're going to have even light vertically from top to bottom for your subject. So that is zones, my friends. That's working with zones of light. That's going to wrap it up for this month's lighting how-to. So until next month, this is Michael Corsentino for Shutter Magazine. Be sure to hit me up on Facebook, and I will see you guys next month.